Hey, Todd Hampson here, and just want to thank you for coming to this channel and checking out these videos. We're going through a series called Can We Trust the Bible? So for the next several weeks, we're going to be looking at 3 questions related to that question. There's a lot of different avenues we could go down, but we're going to kind of stick to 3 primary evidences, and we're looking at specifically the internal evidence test, the external evidence test, and the manuscript evidence test. And if you've never heard of those, that's fine. Stick with us. We're going to break each of those questions up into 3 segments. So it should be about 9 weeks worth of videos. We're trying to keep them short so they're easy to watch, but also want to make sure that you get a lot out of it and are interested in watching the next one. So stay tuned. If you're catching this on one of the later episodes, be sure to go back and watch the others. The whole playlist is going to be worth your time and kind of builds on each other. So check it out. Also, if you haven't heard of it, go check out prophecyprosacademy.com. Look at the information there. You can sign up for the next module. Don't miss that. If you're looking forward to some deep teaching, to being equipped, we're bridging the gap between Sundays and seminary. So go check out prophecyprosacademy.com and sign up today, either for the newsletter just to find out more information, or go ahead and sign up for the next module. You won't regret it. I promise. People are loving this academy and getting a lot out of it. So take care. Talk to you soon, and watch this segment for this multi-part series called Can We Trust the Bible? The first time I heard the word apologetics, I thought it was the art of apologizing using Christian principles. Sounds like something having to do with apologizing, but it's actually the dictionary definition of apologetics is an argument offered in defense or vindication of something. So Christian apologetics are things that highlight evidences that support our faith or back up the claims that the Bible makes. And there's all kinds of different categories of that. There's philosophical apologetics, there's, as I mentioned, scientific apologetics, and then what we're looking at here is the kind of internal, external, and bibliographical evidence tests related to apologetics. So those are the key things we're looking at. As I mentioned briefly, the twofold purpose of apologetics is to strengthen our faith and to answer questions when people have it, to be able to, with confidence, be able to tell people why we can trust the Bible. We can't reason someone into faith, but we can show them we have a reasonable faith. In other words, it's not a leap of faith to be a Christian. It does take faith. Matter of fact, Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith, it's impossible to please him. So it does take faith to become a believer and to accept these things, but it's not a leap of faith. It's not a blind, irrational faith. It's a faith based on reason and fact and evidence and history. So that's the kind of the key thrust behind apologetics. We're never going to prove to someone God exists. We can't recreate God in a test tube or show them God, but we can show them the fingerprints of God, and that's what we're trying to do. So we're going to look at these 3 tests. The first test today we're going to look at is the internal evidence test. And by the way, one other thing before we dive into the actual evidence for the internal evidence test, many famous people throughout history have attempted to disprove Christianity, and as they've investigated the concrete evidence, they've actually become Christians. 2 famous people you may have heard of that happened to were C.S. Lewis. He was an atheist, and he was trying to disprove Christianity, and it took a long time for him to kind of come to the Lord. He's got kind of a wild story. Lee Strobel, you've probably heard of a book called The Case for Christ or The Case for Christianity. He wrote those books after becoming a believer. He was a reporter in Chicago. His wife became a believer. He wanted to tell her how crazy she was and prove that Christianity was for crazy people. And the more he investigated it, the evidence for the resurrection, the evidence for the existence of Jesus, the fact that the whole world was flipped upside down in a single generation in the first century, that Rome became a Christian state because of the witness of Christians. All these things contributed to him becoming a believer. And by the way, there are that story can be repeated all through church history. There's different blogs and resources you can go to that highlight various people throughout church history who tried to disprove Christianity and wound up becoming a Christian because the evidence was so strong. So anyway, let's dive into the internal evidence test. over the years, my wife and I have watched a few, good crime shows. She and my daughter love watching crime shows and the forensics and all that kind of stuff. Well, we stumbled on one recently that's more about people, different airports trying to catch smugglers, either bringing drugs or some other illegal stuff into a country or trying to smuggle it out, and just how they catch them and how they find it, done in different ways. It's kind of our brainless, let our brains rest at the end of the day, non-thinking TV show we can just watch and kind of enjoy as we're talking about our day and that kind of thing. But one thing we have noticed on that show is one of the tactics that are used by the authorities is if there's two people that are trying to smuggle in drugs or trying to do something illegal, maybe it's two people getting on the same flight that act like they don't know each other, or two people getting on a flight acting like they know each other and they're together, but they're actually really not. They're both smuggling something. So when the police have suspicion of that, they have ways of separating the two witnesses or the two people and then interrogating them to find out, kind of get their stories straight. And a lot of times these people will go over their stories to make sure that they have the key details right. But the more and more questions the police ask them, they notice inconsistencies and they realize the stories don't line up. And that's how they realize and come to the conclusion that they are trying to smuggle something. So they're trained to do that. They have ways of doing that. It reminds me of, heard a story recently of a teacher who was given a big test one day, and 4 students who were in a car together skipped the class or were late to class, missed the test because they didn't study for it, they weren't ready for it. And the excuse they used was they had a flat tire. That's why they were all late to class. And then the teacher wisely said, well, that's no problem. There's really just one question on the test, so we still have time. Just come on in and we'll all take it. And she sat them all down, and then she said, okay, here's the one question for the test. Which tire was flat? Okay, so obviously they didn't collaborate on which tire they were going to say was flat. So they all gave different answers, and they all failed the testing, and they were busted. So anyway, the same is true for the Bible. Though it's a book of 66 books written over a period of about 1,500 years by 40 or more authors, 3 different continents, 3 different languages, it's one complete story with 0 contradictions. Now you might, if you haven't studied this before, you might say, wait, 0 contradictions? But don't I hear all the time from, people in the news or people I see on TV or skeptics in my family or whatever, that the Bible's full of contradictions? Well, the next time someone gives you that challenge, just kindly say, okay, so if the Bible's full of contradictions, why don't you give me your top 10 and I'll look into them. And obviously they won't come up with 10 as they're stumbling around for answers. Say, okay, well, just give me your top 3. What are your top 3 contradictions that you found in the Bible? Because I want to know. I'm a Christian. I want to figure out if there's contradictions in the Bible. And then you can dial it back even to 1. Okay, well, just give me 1 bona fide contradiction in the Bible. And usually what it'll boil down to is just something that they don't like about the Bible. Or they'll cite something that's out of context or doesn't give the complete context. Like a common one that I've heard is, well, God said, don't murder. But then he's telling through his prophets, there's times where he told the prophets to tell Israel or Judah to go kill people. Well, context is key. Obviously, the 10 commandments, the commandment is do not murder is really what it's talking about. Don't take a life unjustly. Don't take innocent life. That's different than fighting a battle or fighting against God's enemies. So the context is the key there. But all that to say, usually when it boils down to it, people don't really have a legit contradiction. Now, that's not to say there aren't some zinger verses. There aren't some tough passages that you have to wrestle to reconcile. Even in seminary, they forced us to look at some passages that are problem passages, not contradictions, but things that are hard to figure out exactly how they play out or what they exactly mean. So there's definitely that in Scripture, but there are no bona fide, well-known contradictions that people can point to. The Bible does not contradict itself.